The total donation. It's like 2 years old. So I just.
She's calling in virtual. She's from Richmond. Yes. Yes.
I was just saying to Mary, I got a kid for 1 quarantine. He doesn't have it. Just get your own risk.
No, I mean, who knows, right?
Yeah, we're all at least 2 degrees separate.
I said I just got that from Richmond.
Yeah, she and I.
I thought I was late, but it's can I get your phone tomorrow? All right.
It should have taken 30
Okay,
seconds.
thanks so much.
and it took 50.
We are live. You're around.
Wonderful, wonderful. Okay, I'm gonna call to order. I'm gonna call to order the January 13th, 2022 MBTA Government and Personnel Finance Committee. Personnel Finance Committee, not personnel.
If you have recommendations that are wrong,
Finance Committee. We have a quorum in that we have Chair Wheeler is with us. The board chair for Arlington County, Katie Christo, who, by the way, congratulations on being elected board chair, is with us. Mayor Davis Younger is with us. So we have a quorum. In addition, Councilmember Schneider has joined us, and I think that, and Mary has joined us. Thank you. So we have a quorum plus 2 other authority members who we are happy to welcome to GPC. Before I call for the approval of the December 9th, 2021 meeting minutes, I'm going to say Happy Founders Day to the ladies of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority on 109th anniversary of Founders Day. There's no way I'm letting this day go by without saying that first. So, is it off? No, I don't have to know. Moving down low. Sorry. You can still get her. I'm being courted. She's still gettable. I'm being courted. Okay, having said that, I'm going to ask for the, ask everybody to look at the December 9th, 2021 meeting notes. And to look at them, we have a motion to approve. A motion to approve from Mayor David Younger. Do we have a second? Seconded from Ms. Wheeler. Discussion on that motion. Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That motion will pass 401 with Mr. McKay. I was not attending right now. We're now going to have a discussion on the General Assembly session, which started today. From Tracy Baynard, who's I think down in Richmond already. She's already hard at work, and Ms. Beckman. We do know that we have a couple of bills down there that are MBTA specific, and so we need to discuss those and anything else. Baynard, I will hand it to you, Ms. Beckman.
And before Ms. Vayner starts, I will note, yesterday I did send out a summary sheet of where we were at that time. And this afternoon, I sent out the links to the bills that are MBTA specific. So Ms. Vayner will speak to those bills.
Thank you.
Good evening, Chair Rendell and members of the committee. I'm sorry I'm not with you, but I am in the capital city, so I thought it was safer for me to stay down here. But I wanted to go through where we are in General Assembly. It's completing day 2. There to date are 1,248 House bills and resolutions that have been posted and 646 Senate bills and resolutions. That is, in fact, as you all probably know, slower than we normally have at this point in the session. The ransomware attack that they suffered, they're still recovering from. So bills are coming in fits and starts. Because of that, we probably haven't seen everything that we're going to see. But as Ms. Bachman said, there are 2 that have jumped out because they are specifically related to the NVTA. I have had an opportunity to talk to both of the patrons of those bills. So Chair Randall, if you want me to jump right into those two bills, I can, or
I think that's gonna be a longer conversation. So let's have that, let's do that first.
okay. If you don't mind, I'm gonna start with what I think will be a simpler conversation, and that is regarding House Bill 704 from Delegate Mark Keem. Delegate Keem represents Vienna, and the Vienna legislative program pretty much every year includes the request to have sidewalks be a specific identified in our section of the code item. I had a good conversation with Delegate Keene this afternoon, along with Noel Dominguez of Fairfax County, sort of reminding him of why it has been a challenge to have just keep, we don't want our code section to be a Christmas tree. He certainly understood that. He knows that we have traditionally opposed this bill for that reason. Reminded him of the multiple projects, multimodal projects that are being done through both the 30% and the 70% money. Did have a good conversation that I think he would definitely appreciate the authority staff helping him identify for the town maybe some other programs they might access for some of the initiatives they have. The town also has about $7 million that they were given. A former mayor in their will donated $7 million to the town of Vienna for sidewalks. Very generous donation, and the town council is currently going through planning and implementing projects based on that money. So we will, unless I hear differently, continue to oppose this bill. But again, working with Delegate Keene, maybe finding some way to address the town's ways that doesn't require them to keep asking for this type of legislation. I'm going to stop there and answer any questions.
Any of your questions? So I do. So you said he represents the town of Vienna, Mr. King.
Yes, ma'am.
And that request came from them.
Yes, it did, and does.
And the town of Vienna is located within, it's in Fairfax, but it's a separate town within Fairfax. And their population does not allow a person to sit on MBTA, it's too small of a population.
Well, they could, like on the authority's action item tonight is the appointment of the town rep.
Right. But they just have not chose to do that.
They chose not to.
Okay. All right, because we're gonna probably go back to Mr. Wood tonight.
Yes.
Okay, so they could do that if they chose to. And
If they chose
because
to.
I don't know that I've ever seen the town of Vienna as the town rep since I've been here. Okay, that's good to know.
They have a relatively new mayor.
They do.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but in all the time I've been here, I don't remember them being the town. I could be mistaken. I remember them being the town rep.
I don't.
And they're pretty active on the PCAC. It's just when we get to who would like to serve from the town on the authority. The other thing I would note, I don't recall a sidewalk project
No.
having been submitted to the authority
From Vienna.
from Vienna.
They've been using revenue sharing, and NRSTP and CMAC have been their major. I'm trying to remember if I've had a TAP application
From
from
the
them,
town.
which would be another place they could go, which is federal.
Yeah, and they get their full 30% from MBTA.
Yeah, from Fairfax County.
From MBTA through
Yes,
Fairfax
through
County
Fairfax
to
County.
Vienna. They get their full
Yeah.
30%. Okay, and have they talked to Fairfax County, do we know, about helping them do sidewalks?
Yes, actually, as I said, Noel Dominguez from Fairfax County was with me on this meeting and had a chance to walk Delegate Keene through their relationship. The county identifies the 30%. It's, as she said, goes into an escrow account. And the county's perspective is they just review the project ideas that they qualify under NVTA rules. And if they do, the town is allowed to pursue. I have no information of what kind of projects they've been funding through that 30%.
You know, I Oh, I need to take this phone call. Will you take the meeting, Ms. Weaver?
I had a question. Let me address the issue, and please understand the way I'm going to ask the question doesn't assume that I'm disagreeing with the MPTA position. But can we explain to folks how you would pursue a sidewalk project for the 70% money? Because the impression may be, and it may be broader than just the town, that little projects, sidewalk projects can't survive the NVTA standards set in the statute and the process. So could we do a better job of explaining, no, there, not only is there nothing including sidewalks as a project, and explain why that's the case.
Well, and thank you for that question, Mr. Snyder, because this isn't the first time we've seen this bill. You know, this seems to be an every year thing. Maybe it took some COVID years off, but we've explained this. Staff has met with the town to talk about their transportation plan, tell them that they definitely can apply directly to us for sidewalk projects. So I'm not sure where the disconnect lies, but we've met with the town staff. We've talked about this bill every year. I remember when Chair Noe was the chair of NVTA, go down to Richmond, like, you can come, you can apply to us for the project, for a sidewalk project. They haven't done so. We did talk to them when they were redoing their transportation plan. Say, hey, you can, once you complete the plan and know what your priorities are, you can submit those projects.
So this is also a discussion that we can have with Chairman McKay when he comes, because I know in Loudoun for our towns that are involved in MBTA and the ones that are not, quite frankly, the district supervisor who that town sits inside is often the person who advocates for, helps write up and pushes through the board itself money for this type of thing in one of our towns. And I don't know who that district supervisor is, but it may also be a discussion with Chair McKay just to find out, you know, has that line been discussed? So has the town talked to the district supervisor, talked to the chair, and talked to the county? So maybe when Mr. McKay comes for the full authority meeting, we can ask him that question.
And according to Fairfax staff, the town has used their 30% for sidewalk.
Okay, so they know that that's possible.
Yeah.
Okay. We have a whole sidewalk contingency fund in our county. So, yeah. Okay, all right.
If I could just further add, I think it's critical to make the point that even under the 70%, there's nothing that precludes a sidewalk project. And that's a very, yeah, you can say to people, you can go here, you can go there, you can go there, but their question is directly to NVTA.
Right.
Right. So.
Right. And actually we encourage it because number one, we are multimodal. Number two, sometimes we take criticism for this and people say, oh, these projects, they score well because of the lower cost, but they are providing a regional benefit. And that's really what we look at. So we do try to encourage the various modes, particularly, and I know the WOND trail is a larger trail project, but we do encourage these projects.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Mr. Snyder. Yeah. Okay. All right, Ms. Baynard, thank you.
Thank you.
Bill.
Next bill we're going to talk about is Senate Bill 251 from Senator Servo. Also represents Prince William and Fairfax. Had a good conversation with the senator this afternoon, asking him to confirm what I was reading in the bill and walking us through it. And when I asked him just to clarify his objective is this: he believes if there is dedicated funding for bike ped multi-use trails that are not affiliated with a road widening, that having a dedicated pool of funding would encourage localities to create more of those type of projects because they'd want to pursue that pot of money.
Wait a minute, you said he believes there's a dedicated fund.
If there is, if there is.
Oh, if there's a dedicated fund, thank you.
If there is, yes, ma'am. So I'm going to walk you through what the bill does. If you have it in front of you, it creates dedicated funding for bike ped trails in 3 ways. It would set aside 10% of the 30% funding before it goes back to localities. It would set aside 10% of the regional 70% before it is applied to projects. That money would be allocated by the authority for bicycle and pedestrian projects. It then identifies that these revenues are set aside with additional 30% of the Transportation Alternatives Program, also known as TAP. All of you all have used the TAP program for a variety of non-vehicle projects, sidewalks, trails, safe to school paths, whatever. He recommends taking 30% of the state's allocation, directing that to the authority, and all of that money would be provided in a pool for pedestrian bike trails facilities not affiliated with a road project. His enactment clause states that no additional TAP funds allocated to the Commonwealth will be used in Northern Virginia.
Whoa.
When I asked him about that,
Mary had an intense comment just there.
Well, I'm just thinking of the things I've been funding with that program, because there's 2
Yeah.
million, there's a
Yeah.
million a year that I put on projects, and then we probably get another
Like
2 to 3 million that Scott puts on projects. And there's money at TPB that comes to us too. So it's a big pot of money.
Why would a Northern Virginia representative?
Because he doesn't like the decisions we're making.
I know, but to use that, I mean, does he think that that's gonna make his bill more attractive to other opponents?
Well, it's right.
There are
Also, I mean,
people,
what a bargaining chip.
sorry, Tracy.
We know how
no,
much.
thank you. Ms. Hines, I was going to ask you to confirm some things because I'm not fully up on TAP, and I know you all just discussed it at CTP.
It's 44 million statewide.
Yeah.
And then it gets divided up into the region. So every one of the 9 districts gets 2 million as a base. So that's 18 million of the 44. 13 million goes to the MPOs across the state, of which there's like 4. And then the other remaining about 12 is decided by the secretary and the 2 at-large. The 5 at-large. So they each get about 2 million.
So ignoring the TAP issue for a moment, we know what our revenues have been the last couple of years with regards to the 30% and the 70%. How much does that equal if you set aside the 30% of the 30% of the 30%?
It's 10%, 10% of the 30%.
And then 10% of the 70%.
Correct.
How much is that? Are we talking about?
It'd be about 35 million.
Okay, so we're talking about taking $35 million out. What is that? A total of what? Of a total of how much?
A total of 350.
Okay, so really just 10% of the overall amount.
It's 10% of each of the buckets.
Okay, okay. And so that's about 35 million. Is it possible that he thinks that that's why he can get away with letting the rest of the TAP go because there's now $35 million?
Well, I will just say that the TAP program, the things that I have been funding, and these are all requests from localities. So we've funded quite a bit in the town of Herndon, sidewalk and other kind of infrastructure. Percival got a chunk to do their downtown, get their streetlights and other things like that in. We funded trails in Hillsborough to complement the other project. I funded a lot of sidewalks in the town of Occoquan. I mean, my approach has been mostly to look at what towns need because I know they don't have a lot of other money and try to help there where I can. And then it's safe routes to schools projects. I mean, the Lead Road project was funded with town money. So, I mean, I don't know where you go for those things if this gets diverted into trails. I mean, it's a value judgment, right? Trails are more important than these other things. That's what
Well,
it
let
is.
me ask, Tracy, did, a lot of times, not all the time, but sometimes when the legislators, start filing these bills, it's at the request of a county or town. So when you go to, Ann, did you all ask him for this?
No.
Okay.
That's
Dave,
my knowledge.
did you all ask him for this?
I think we heard from Chairman McKay.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a big
Well,
push
yeah,
on
this is so
though.
interesting.
There's a big push on for trails. I'll just say that. There's 3 big trails being funded through the governor's proposed. We don't know if those will survive. But the bike people are definitely being successful in lobbying for bike lanes and trails and other bicycle infrastructure, and we really don't have dedicated
Okay.
for those.
So they're going to come after others.
Yeah, I mean, they don't, well, there's, having done the omnibus and Route and 81 and a number of other things, and with the fact that we have an anti-tax governor now, the reality is there's not a lot of other places to go. And the federal funds that we talked last time about vulnerable users, it's unclear how that program is actually going to work because some of the things I've been funding with TAP could be funded with that, depending on how it gets structured.
I think, if I may, Madam Chair, I think the question for Ms. Baynard at this point is what do we think the prospects of such a bill are? I don't know what kind of
They
allies
are the prospects of the passing
of
of
the
this.
bill, yeah. I don't know where the allies and opponents may lie beyond what we might do as an authority. I mean, does it have?
Legs.
It literally dropped last night. So, I mean, again, I think as localities and as the authority, if we're uncomfortable with this sort of carving out of our money for something this specific,
We are.
we are. I will say that I have found members of the General Assembly over the years to be sympathetic to us on that. I will say, we do have a member of the authority who sits on, well, what's weird about this bill is it goes to local government and not transportation. I need to figure out why that happened. It needs to be moved to a different committee. It should be in transportation. That's where our bills are. So I'll need to speak to the clerk and get that re-referred. But our delegation will look to us for the position on this. And frankly, that we have built allies outside of our region to speak to the need of, we don't need, there's smart scale prioritization and regional authorities with prioritization processes driven by data, because the goal was to take this sort of hands-on activity away from the General Assembly to a certain extent, but in some ways. So yeah, I think we will have to put a push on to speak to this about why it doesn't work, how harmful it could be. There are other ways to address this. Ms. Hines has talked about the TAP program. I'm sorry, but I'm not sure you could justify to the rest of the Commonwealth that we're just going to take 30% off the top.
I think it'd be an issue. And Tracy, I should just let you know, if you need it, we were given a list of all the active TAP projects in our districts. So I do have that with the dollar amounts.
It might be worth having even a snapshot of a summary of those, Ms. Hine, to show that this program is meeting a need for a lot of different types of jurisdictions. And what is proposed in this bill would not allow that to continue. Is that a fair assessment?
That is a very fair assessment. I can take photos of the pages that I have, or I can ask for an electronic copy.
If you can get electronic, because maybe I can manipulate it in some way to kind of do a highlight of the different variety.
Okay, I'll ask for a copy.
And if I could, this is another one, because I had a conversation with Senator Servo. So we can fund trails, sidewalks, bike ped projects today. And we can, and we do. I do want to start there. Notably, the WONT trail that we have funded for Falls Church, we funded for Arlington County. I guess one of my concerns is the TAP wording. That's federal money. We would really have to look into the authority's ability to undertake and use the federal money in any way different from how the federal laws state. The other thing that I'm always talking about, and I'm sure Ms. Crystal will know, long-term benefit. My concern is if we set aside a pot of money for a certain type of project, it doesn't mean that all localities or agencies are going to apply for that funding. And if you read the bill, it says any unused amount will just roll over. Would we upset long-term benefits? We are getting to a point where hopefully by the adoption of your latest 6-year program, all localities will be at least evened out on where we are with long-term benefits. If we have set aside, because we don't control the projects that are submitted to the authority for funding. That's something that the localities and agencies do. So even then, we can't be assured that we're going to have an influx of submittals. I know the city, and they're not here, so the city of Fairfax for this funding program, they were going to submit a trail project. They were like, yeah, we're sure it's going to score well. They didn't for other reasons. But again, it's an independent trail. It wasn't tied to, because what you'll hear, oh, when on VDOT's road, you have to have a 5-foot sidewalk on one side, 10-foot trail on the other. It was an independent trail like the WOND. So these are just some of my concerns regarding this bill. And I know it's looked at to try to incentivize projects, but on the authorities end, we don't submit the projects, you submit them. And I really can't dictate your priorities, because one of the things I know, what we see on our end as staff, the localities and sometimes the agencies come to us with the larger ticket projects, if you will, more of the mega projects, because you have a harder time securing those funds. Whereas you have the 30% CMAQ, TAP, and other funding sources that can help you with some of the bike ped projects.
So I would, this may depend on, again, the extent of the legs that this bill has, because I don't want to ask staff to put a tremendous amount of manpower into, or manpower into analyzing this. But one of the things I mentioned at our last meeting, the reason this bill is so frustrating to me is exactly what Ms. Beckman said, which is that this is what we used to in Arlington use our 30% funds.
Yeah.
We were effectively zeroed out with the 2018 Metro funding bill. And if you would like to see more trail projects, particularly in the inner jurisdictions that were hardest hit by that, restoring our 30% funds would be a great way to do it. I wonder if it would be possible
Here,
to,
Ms. Bristol.
yeah, got some feelings about it. And for me, right, as an advocate, obviously, as you all know, for bike and ped trail, this is just could not be more the wrong direction. But if it might be possible without a tremendous amount of lift from staff, I think it could be really useful to be able to put some specifics behind exactly what Ms. Beckman was saying, which is that regional funds are not, we know this, regional funds are not being applied for. We're not receiving applications for trail projects for regional funds. But meantime, you know, X number of projects, X number of local fund dollars of the 30% funds have gone to these projects to really emphasize that regional money, authority money has absolutely historically funded trails. It's just that it hasn't come from 70% funds. And again, the biggest challenge to using authority money on these projects is the zeroing out of our 30% funds 4 years ago. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know if that data is easy enough to pull from the history of 30% funds, but.
So should we just have Katie call Scott Servo? That was great. No, you're totally correct.
Really nice report.
You actually, no, you're totally correct. And truthfully, if I'm not mistaken, you talked at that time about how later on down the road, not having that 30% was going to, impact your all's ability to do smaller projects. You had that discussion at that time.
I guess, Madam Chair, I would just say a good goal, wrong way to do it, particularly mandating set asides for either 30% or 70% leads you. And, frankly, if it came down to which interests win in terms of the set aside, I'm not sure the trail and bike people win that. So they're much better off with a flexible process that allows the funding of different, and in fact, we have funded different types of projects. And I think collectively we get what the message that's trying to be communicated here. We get that, and it will be worked through the process. But really, they start Christmas tree, and you're not going to like some of the ornaments that are in it, so.
I'll add, it's arbitrary. I don't like when people just take arbitrary numbers and set them aside. I mean, unless they're going to be tied to something specific, and it's just not a good way to do business.
And I will note regarding your 30%, what we see is a lot of the localities use the 30% for transit, their metro obligation, VRE, PRTC, whatever the case may be, in addition to trails. The law, it provides more flexibility for the 30%. Now, with the reduction of revenues, of course, everyone took a hit, but the severe hit was for Arlington and then Alexandria regarding their 30%. So again, we encourage those types of projects to be submitted. I think for the trail projects we've received, we've tried to make sure that we've allocated some funding for those projects.
So I'm gonna summarize everything you all said. Again, I think the issue I like the Christmas tree won't work. We need the flexibility. The fact of the matter is 30% money in addition to transit has been used for these projects. And that has been a challenge because some of our jurisdictions after the metro funding plan had less 30% money coming to them for sure. And that hasn't been completely fixed. I will take this back to Senator Servo. I will be talking to all of your liaisons to share this as talking points. And just basically say that we don't see a way to fix this bill as currently envisioned, that if the vision is the way to find dedicated funding is to earmark existing funds, which are overcommitted anyway, as we all know, that's not going to be a net win for the region. Is that?
Can I ask a brief question, just in terms of this bill really having no resolution, but I mean this, we sort of glibly say, we'll send it to a study, but I genuinely, perhaps not under this incoming administration, but I'm thinking about Ms. Hines' point that part of the reason trail advocates have been frustrated, and again, as somebody who, like Mr. Snyder would like to see more of them, is that there aren't dedicated funding.
Right.
There isn't dedicated funding. I mean, would it be appropriate to ask for a study or some look into, for example, maybe how other states have sought to support trail funding at a state level?
So Ms. Hines, I'm going to ask you to keep me honest. I'm going to try to remember what happened at CTB. There actually was a study this past year done by the Office of Intermodal Planning and Investment, which looked at the issue of multi-use trails in the Commonwealth. What was the need? What has been happening? Assessing, and they develop a prioritization process. Where the study that's about to be released, there was sort of a preview for CTB this week. Yes, trails are important. They're important transportation facilities. Ms. Hine emphasized that point before the full CTB because they were, and then they're also important economic development, particularly some of the larger regional trails. And so Ms. Hines, I suspect that the CTB will be spending time in this calendar year coming up with a specific trail funding strategy and program out of existing funds and some of the new federal funds. Is that a fair next step?
I think so, but I do think, Tracy, a lot of this is gonna depend on whether the governor is interested.
Yeah,
And,
that's fair. That is fair.
but the recommendation was to put 20 million and create some grant programs, but the grant programs themselves, the level of funding was not. But it's in the areas we would think, you know, are important. I'm just looking here in my thing, the grant. Anyway, it was like planning, construction, maintenance. It was,
Maintenance,
you know,
right.
it was a pretty balanced approach to the whole thing.
I mean,
But this is about these bigger trails. So this is like the Shenandoah Trail, the Eastern Shore Trail, the one, the
They
fall
cross
line,
individual
that cross multiple localities that have an economic development component to them. So I said, you know, I did ask about missing links, because I think
Yep.
about getting from Arlington to Loudon, for instance. The infrastructure is mostly there, but there's places where it's not. And so they said, yeah, missing links could, you know, under certain definitions, but there would be a lot of work. But it's not clear to me, given Mr. Miller's questions, whether this is even anything on the, you know, the incoming Secretary of Transportation is a current CTB member from Hampton Road. So
Yeah.
he was there for the whole
So maybe
conversation.
another discussion we need to have, but yeah.
Yeah.
You know, the incoming,
Yes, and his sister lived in Arlington, and I worked with her on the Crystal City plan. So you know, we have a friendship that is related to it.
so that's great to know.
Yeah.
So to go back to Chair Crystal, there's a foundation to take that next step and have a state discussion about dedicated funding, but we will have to wait and see how the new administration focuses their time on particular modes and efforts.
And the other thing I would say is this does not address maintenance at
Yeah.
all, which we all know is a big deal, that it's not addressed in this report. So how that would happen, where the money would come from that, you know, what's the commitment, you know, VDOT, when you build a road, VDOT agrees to maintain it. That is not the case with trails.
Speaking from a jurisdiction that plows snow off its trails.
I don't have specialized equipment stored regularly.
Indeed.
Okay.
Thank you for the discussion. Any other questions or thoughts I should remember, as I'm going to write all this down and use it as talking points with my colleagues.
Do you have anything else you want to tell us besides those two items?
Not, not on this bill. It is.
Do you want to have a discussion at all about, you know?
So I understand that Chair Wheeler asked about a study bill that has been dropped, introduced. House Joint Resolution 76 is a study resolution from Delegate Torian. If you all remember, Department of Rail and Public Transportation completed their Springfield to Quantico Enhanced Public Transportation study. I think I got all the words in there, which was essentially a look at the Fairfax County to Prince William County corridor, look at existing transit that exists, whether it was PRTC buses, omnibus, the yellow and blue line that comes through Fairfax County, of course, VRE, and look at, from a high level, potential options for enhancing, expanding any or all of those modes, or actually, I mean, don't forget the Fairfax County BRT along Route 1. So the study was a high level study. It sort of set out some parameters. I would say a feasibility study that said any and all of those are feasible, but there are a number of next steps that particularly Fairfax and Prince William County would have to have discussions about what to do next. Delegate Torian's study resolution is a proposal of how to move towards what is next. It requests, or frankly require, it's not really a request, the Department of Rail and Transportation to study Northern Virginia Regional Transit and develop a regional transit plan that includes an extension of Metro Rail service into Prince William County. It identifies the stakeholders who should be involved, not only all of the localities in Planning District 8, the authority, the Transportation Commission, PRTC Commission, WMATA, and VRE. And then it requires a report to be submitted by the first day of the 2023 regular session. I have to say, I'm not surprised that legislators in the quarter have some ideas on what those next steps are. This is just the first version of something that we've seen that's been introduced, and I don't know if there'll be more.
All righty. Anybody? Tracy,
Yes, ma'am.
how do we? So we have an Secretary of Transportation.
So we new Secretary of Transportation. We do not have a permanent Department of Rail and Public Transportation Director. Ms. Mitchell is being asked to stay through the transition for a couple of months, but that is the only commitment the administration has made to her. It was announced today by Mr. Miller he was speaking before the House Transportation Committee this morning.
Let's go in a different direction on that.
Yeah, so we don't know I don't know what DRPT's response to this resolution is. I haven't had a chance to talk to Ms. Mitchell.
I was going to a different direction on that. So the new secretary, he is a CTV member, and Mary knows his sister, which is really, really good.
I know him too.
Which is really good. Is there any? He's from the Norfolk area.
Yes. Mhm.
He grew up on the water.
Is there any education that he might benefit from about this particular authority?
Oh, there's no. I mean, so let me go this. He's been very active in transportation. He's just completed, I guess, his 8th year on CTB. It was 4 years under Governor McDonald, 4 years under Governor Northam. During that time, he
came back to the CTV about a year and a half ago.
Okay, thank you. He
kicked him off. And then Northam put him back on, but there was about a 6-year hiatus.
Right.
But I guess I'm asking Tracy specifically with him being from Norfolk, and I understand his background. I did some reading. Do you think there'd be a benefit to educate him about this authority?
Oh, no question. We would have to do that with, unless the Secretary of Transportation actually came from Northern Virginia, we will always have to do that education piece. There's no question we will do that. It's just a matter of when he's gonna be able to look up and breathe enough to be able to have a good meeting with us.
Until after session.
Okay.
And I would agree with that.
All right.
He's got a lot on his plate, but no, yes, Chair Randall.
We look forward to doing that, and we look forward to doing that before somebody else does it, before other people might do it, right? If he's going to get educated about the Northern Virginia Authority, I prefer we educate him and not, Tim Hugo, right? So, let's after the session try to do that as quickly as possible.
Right. We're hoping we're going to see some nominees for deputy pretty shortly after the inauguration on Saturday.
And I hope some of those come from Northern Virginia.
Yes, that would be nice. And my understanding is Deputy Secretary Lawson will be staying around. He does know us because we've talked with him a lot. But both when he was CFO at VDOT and since he's been Deputy Secretary.
And my understanding is the commissioner isn't changed.
Well, that's good. That's
which
good.
Which is also good. certainly someone who's worked with us, particularly with Ms. Bachman on some issues. So
That's good.
there'll be some continuity of folks who do know about us.
Do we expect that most of these positions might be filled after the session?
No.
No, session. No session, after the session.
I think he's gonna make some announcements on Monday. Yeah,
Okay,
Mr. Miller.
okay. All right, good.
Sorry, I'm gonna have to practice.
No. I appreciate whatever list you have here. That's good. Keep it up, keep it up. Okay.
Are there any initial thoughts about the joint resolution on the transit regional plan piece?
So, yeah, I have one question. It's very specific to that corridor and metro. It's not broad, it's not a broad transit regional authority, just it's specific to that area. Is that correct?
That is correct. It calls, it's interesting. It calls for development of a regional transit plan,
Which
but it
sounds very broad.
requires that it include extending metro into Prince William.
Okay, because just having a regional transit plan sounds very broad. We're doing that
We don't
now.
have any of this, actually. There are no regional bodies engaged in long-term planning. I can't think of a single plan.
Right, so
It's
it's
really not like a transportation planning board.
So that seems sort of redundant to me, and so I'm just kind of wondering, like that, if it's just a metro corridor, and I understand that the desire to do that, but creating a regional transit plan, I think we already have that, so that's my only concern.
If I could, I mean, Ms. Maynard, I think this is, we've seen a few different runs of this in different angles. I think there are members of the General Assembly from Prince William who are interested in expanding metro plan in Prince William.
Really?
And I think there have been different runs of this over the
Which I
years. and think
totally
this is
support,
probably the
and I
latest.
totally support, so I would support an effort to do that.
But yeah, there is some long-range planning underway right now at WMATA, on a maybe 20-30-year timetable. That we can certainly, I mean, really, there is a very active plan. They've been taking comments on it, about possible line extensions.
The
So
Prince William County,
what's that?
the Prince William.
I don't think Prince William's in that plan.
Oh,
I'm gonna pull it
okay.
up, but,
Yeah.
right. So I am being a little sarcastic, but aside from pointing out the many existing plans, perhaps we could direct their attention to the correct venues for advocacy like that, long range planning happening at WMATA.
And if I could, we're in the process of updating transaction. We have not only the localities at the table, we have the regional entities at the table. We have a BRT working group. We're looking at everyone's comp plans and your own transit plans and things like that to make sure our long-range transportation plan is holistic and inclusive of where we see ourselves in 2040 and 2045. And remember that our plan is fiscally and geographically unconstrained. And we look at the capital cost, not the operating or maintenance, but I do want to note, when we talk about extending metro, in the current transaction plan, which was adopted in October 2017, we did note to address port capacity at Roslyn Tunnel is about $25 billion. And it's my understanding that you have to have Maryland and DC agree in agreement to address port capacity at the tunnel before we start looking at extensions. Not that we won't put them in transaction because it is long range and fiscally and geographically unconstrained, but we do have the BRT working group so that we can try to look at express service that can give us quicker headways and comparable levels of ridership at lower cost without some of the constraints that we see with some of these heavy rail extensions.
Ms. Bagman just answered that question much better than I did. The blue and orange, the capacity and reliability study does not include Prince William because it is a necessary but not sufficient step to address core capacity.
So but maybe if Delegate Torian, they're still Torian for the moment. Actually, no. Delegate Torian, maybe it would be a transit plan for the I-95 corridor, just with that small change would get, if that's what the idea is to talk about that would sort of Yeah, maybe there's something there, because I
You
want to
know.
support that.
Yeah, that would cross the planning,
Yes,
cross
for the
those,
I-95
yeah.
corridor. I'll just throw that out.
That was what was done on the 66 corridor several times before we actually got to the solution. And so it created a set of options that people could actually,
I'll just throw that out.
that's a good
Right,
idea.
and I, Chair Wheeler will, maybe you can remind me if I may remember this correctly, as the Springfield to Quantico study was released, DRPT noted that there were some specific options of what the logical next steps might be if the localities chose to talk with DRPT about them. I think you could do a full feasibility study, something that puts you on a path to a full NEPA type project. Again, I think it was really, at least my understanding was, wanting to understand from the two localities perspective in particular, and, the encompassing towns, what made the most sense for you all as the next steps.
Right, and I think that the disconnect is that it has to be advocated for it has to be advocated for Fairfax to do it, to either get it to Prince William County, and so we're just trying to get a consensus about that. Like, so that we're all on the same page, and I think that's what the goal is, which isn't a bad goal, but it's that, it's not just, we can't do it in a vacuum without other regional partners advocating for it, and I'll just throw that out there.
So I guess my question for you all is, do you want to just monitor how this goes? Would you like me to go back to Delegate Torian and ask him to consider maybe doing a very specific I-95 corridor study? Do I share with him information from, as Chair Crystal mentioned, the existing regional transit plans being developed? How would you like to proceed on this?
It may be beneficial to see if you'd be interested in learning about the core capacity study that is underway right now at WMATA. We actually had in Arlington, a member of our delegation had submitted a bill that wanted to study the potential for WMATA under Columbia Pike, or on Columbia Pike. And I think one of the most effective ways to respond to that actually I think that led to the withdrawing of the bill, was 101 on the core capacity study, some understanding of what the structural limitations are on. It's not simply about laying track to expand, but there are core capacity issues. Not to be too quick to volunteer the team at NVTC, but they do a great job of explaining what that study is and describing those core capacity challenges. And I suspect I'd be happy to, if he would be interested in receiving such a briefing, because he's a smart delegate. I mean, so I think he'll understand.
And I would also add, I mean, if the goal is to look and continue to further Metro to Prince William County, it will take 20 years. It will take 20 years, and we need to start somewhere. And if that is the major thing, and it's the I-95 corridor, and it's this, then yes, having a 20 or 30-year plan in place is not necessarily a bad idea. It's just the way to saying creating a regional transit plan, well, that's rather broad. So I would actually maybe talk to him about what his end goal is.
Okay. Well, I'll have a conversation with him as soon as I can and get back with you all about that. I just haven't had an opportunity to get a hold of him today, or, well, yeah, I didn't see the bill until last night, so today.
Well, go on, Tracy, I'm sorry, go on.
No. I just want to say if there's anything else on this topic.
Just one last question. Who is the chair and vice chair of transportation this year on the House and Senate side?
Sure. So on the Senate side, it has not changed. Senator Marsden is still the chair. They don't really have a vice chair per se in the Senate. In the House, of course, it is all changed. Our chair is Delegate Terry Austin from Allegheny Bedford area, someone that I personally have worked with. I think it's fair to say we have found him as a non-Northern Virginian, really good person to work with on our issues. He's very interested in our issues and very sensitive to some of the challenges we have. And our vice chair is, once again, Northern Virginia has a vice chair of the House Transportation Committee, and Delegate LaRocque was named as vice chair. The full Northern Virginia group on House Transportation this year, it's changed a little bit. Delegate Murphy, who was, of course, vice chair for the last 2 years, Delegate Delaney, Delegate Watts, Delegate Reed are there for the last 2 years. Delegate Supermanyam has been added. Delegate LaRocque, of course, has been there for a long time. And then Delegate Herring has come back on transportation.
The Delegate Rome is no longer?
Delegate Rome and Delegate Helmer are no longer on transportation. That is correct.
This is really helpful. Okay, thank you. Wow. Wow. All right, that's very helpful. Very helpful.
I'll give you all an update of where we are on issues around funding. And I'm just going to say we haven't seen all the bills we're going to see. The ones we've seen so far are not great. There are, and I don't have all the bill numbers because I know there are more coming. We have seen 3 bills that temporarily suspend a fuels tax. There's 2 bills that temporarily suspend the regional fuels tax. And the way the bills read, it is literally every regional fuels tax. So that would be the regional fuels tax that goes to PRTC and NVTC, the portion of said regional fuels tax that goes to the Metro Capital Fund. I'm forgetting something. PRTC, NVTC, VREs, commuter rail operating capital fund is partially funded through fuels tax. It would also impact that. And of course, they're about to issue debt on that revenue in support of the expanded passenger rail service. And then there's a bill that would suspend, these are all suspensions for 1 year, that would suspend, the way the bill is written, it would suspend the fuels tax in total of the state and regional fuels tax. Again, there's more bills to come. I will say the way those bills are written, they are different than Governor Youngkin's statements about what he wanted to do. His campaign statements, his statements since the election have been that he wanted to temporarily roll back the state gas tax increase. None of these bills does that.
They just suspend them all together.
I will say, yeah, right. The bills we've seen are spending all together. I will say this, Secretary Designee Miller today, when he was introducing himself to the House Transportation Committee and was going over the administration's transportation priorities, and I'll go over the rest of them, but his statement was, we believe there's enough state and federal revenue to allow temporary relief from high fuel costs. Again, there's a lot of ways that you could go about saying you implemented that, but allow temporary relief from high fuel costs. I learned earlier today that a general rule of thumb, and I would have to go back and confirm this, but there was someone who thought that every penny on the state fuels tax is about $40 million. Ms. Hines, does that even sound rational?
Yeah, it does. I don't hold me to it, but I think you're in the right ballpark.
So if the governor determines that what he really wants to do is temporarily suspend the 10-cent increase that was adopted in 2020, then that would be $400 million, as my math is correct.
Well, and 5 cents of it hasn't been implemented, right?
No, both 5 cents have been implemented.
So
Uh,
if there's a total suspension, have we worked out that?
That's a whole different kettle of fish. It's, I mean, it's a billion, it's over $1 billion easily.
And they think there's enough.
But well, again, if it depends on what they're asking to do. If it's rollback well, again, bottom line is it's less money for transportation for a year.
Unless they decide to roll in the federal money to just fill the hole.
But isn't it
Which is-
federal money fill other holes right now?
Well, there's a lot of, we're in this world where we really don't know exactly. So there was a bunch of money from 21 that was more than was expected. And then there's federal money on top of that, and the state budget performed better, or the state revenue was better. So you kind of have 3 buckets of money. We put all the 21 money, we've already put that on projects. I think they wouldn't undo that. But how they actually handle the increases and what they do with the federal money, there's a little bit of flexibility. It would make a hole in smart scale, for instance, I think is probably where.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Yeah.
Smart scale. But they could also decide that they're just gonna plug that hole with some one-time money and then come back and implement the task. A year later.
So that's my next question. So when they talk about this, is there a time frame around it, or is this like suspended for? I mean, is there, what are they saying?
I will say the legislation we've seen is for a year or it's 12 to 15 months, depending on which bill you're looking at. We have no specifics from the Youngkin administration at this point. But they will have to, I mean, I suspect next week, after he's sworn in, he will be submitting budget amendments and possibly legislation. So we should see specifics next week.
But that all has to go through stuff.
Well, right, and I think the irony is that a penny or even 10 cents for most of us is going to be less than $100 a year. Or I mean, it's like what the consumer is going to actually experience from that is kind of hard to write home about. That's what he can do. Well, I know, but I mean, but I'm just saying.
That is if they suspend it.
Yeah, if they suspend it, right. I'm just saying, it
Just
doesn't.
saying most people are not gonna really feel it, or they're not even gonna know what they're feeling.
No, it's like when they, it's just so incremental.
Yeah.
They might feel the lack of major projects in there.
Very true.
Well, we're programming, in 25 and 26, Katie, we're
Yes.
not programming now.
So the next governor will get blamed for it.
Exactly.
Okay, all right, well.
What else did he say, Tracy?
Sure. So he went through, so he said the following. We want to address the 30% leakage in aviation networks in Virginia, the concept that there's probably about 30% of aviation service trips that could be happening from Virginia, but are not because the air service is not at the airport. So this is the sort of administration goals. They want to address that. It's important for economic development. They did embrace the rail initiatives. He talked specifically about the Western Rail Initiative and the transforming rail and continuing to move that forward. The continued work to look at providing enough freight capacity or freight opportunities to continue to move truck off of our highways, particularly I-81. Transit and how we adjust to a post-COVID world and using performance measures to understand what we need to do and what makes sense. Commercial space flight, that's been working really well. Regarding DMV, it was a lot of emphasis on in person, we got to get the offices open, and that he will be working. Governor Youngkin has identified a chief transformation officer, gentleman by the name, his last name is Moeller, forget his first name. And he announced that we'll be working very closely with Mr. Moeller to address innovative ideas for DMV.
What is that? A chief transformation officer? What is that?
It's not unusual for governors to name people who will sit with the cabinet but are located in the governor's office. For example, Governor Northam had Dr. Underwood as his chief diversity and inclusion officer. Secretary, this is not a new thing. The governors will do something like that to emphasize something
What did she
particular.
make part of the, what did she make part of the cabinet?
No, she was not a formal secretary, Dr. Underwood. Our chief labor officer was eventually made Secretary of Labor. That was a new position that was created. Actually, in fact, there is a bill that has been introduced that would make Dr. Underwood's position, would make a new cabinet position of Secretary of Diversity and Inclusion. Don't hold me to that title. I forget the whole formal name of it.
Okay, great. Okay, well, we're getting close to our meeting, and so anything major else you want to tell us? Because we want to take a quick break before we.
No, not major. As I said, there are a lot of bills. I will come back to you, and particularly in writing. Certainly, there's a number of Freedom of Information Act bills, FOIA bills, not only regarding meeting rules, but there's around data privacy, minutes, what constitutes an official meeting of public officials for a public body. So again, they're flowing in, and I want to be able to get them to you in a group so we can look at them in that way. But that's all I have at this point, Madam Chair.
Tracy, I'm just sending you that list of transportation alternatives.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, we're good?
Everybody's gonna keep you busy, Ms. Painter.
Well, I do want to say, I want to thank all of your liaisons, continue to be great colleagues to work with, and we do talk about all these things together and try to have a common message. So part of what I'll be doing is taking back to them what we discussed tonight.
All right.
So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Maynard. And
You bet.
back and forth safely.
Thank you.
Because I know you're gonna do it very often. Do we have anything else? Ms. Beckman, you have anything?
I do not.
Okay, then we're going to adjourn this meeting, and 15 minutes, start the